Question 1. System analysis indicates a fleet manager is reviewing driver logs for the upcoming week. Several drivers operate under the short-haul exemption, while others regularly exceed 150 air miles from their normal work reporting location. The manager is considering a simplified scheduling approach that assumes all drivers can operate up to 13 hours on duty daily, provided they do not exceed 11 hours of driving, and is not mandating the 30-minute break for those operating within a 100-mile radius of their base. Which of the following approaches best ensures compliance with Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration, FMCSA, hours of service, HOS, regulations and promotes driver safety? Option A. Focus solely on ensuring drivers do not exceed 11 hours of driving per day, as this is the primary HOS regulation, and defer to driver discretion for on-duty hours and breaks. Option B. Allow drivers to self-certify their adherence to HOS rules, assuming they are aware of the regulations, and only require ELD use for drivers who have previously been flagged for violations. Option C. Implement a scheduling system that strictly adheres to the FMCSA 11-hour driving limit and 14-hour on-duty limit, mandates the 30-minute break for all drivers unless specifically exempt, and requires individual verification of short-haul exemption eligibility for each driver based on their specific routes and return times. Option D. Schedule all drivers for a maximum of 13 hours on duty and 11 hours of driving, and waive the 30-minute break requirement for drivers operating within a 100-mile radius, assuming this is a reasonable approximation of the short-haul exemption. The correct answer is C. Implement a scheduling system that strictly adheres to the FMCSA 11-hour driving limit and 14-hour on-duty limit, mandates the 30-minute break for all drivers unless specifically exempt, and requires individual verification of short-haul exemption eligibility for each driver based on their specific routes and return times. Explanation. This scenario presents a common challenge in transportation management, balancing operational efficiency with strict regulatory compliance, specifically concerning hours of service HOS. The professional challenge lies in interpreting and applying complex HOS rules, including potential exemptions, while ensuring driver safety and preventing fatigue. A manager must navigate these regulations to create schedules that are both compliant and practical, avoiding the pitfalls of overwork or misinterpretation of rules. The correct approach involves a thorough understanding of the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration, FMCSA, HOS regulations, specifically the 11-hour driving limit, 14-hour on-duty limit, and the 30-minute break requirement. It also necessitates a proactive stance on fatigue management, which includes educating drivers on the importance of rest and utilizing available tools like electronic logging devices, ELD, to accurately track and manage driving time. This approach prioritizes safety and legal adherence by ensuring drivers do not exceed their permissible driving and on-duty hours, thereby mitigating the risk of fatigue-related incidents and regulatory penalties. An incorrect approach that relies solely on driver self-reporting without independent verification through ELDs or a robust internal audit system is a significant regulatory failure. This method opens the company to potential violations if drivers miscalculate or intentionally misrepresent their hours, leading to penalties and safety risks. Another incorrect approach that ignores the 30-minute break requirement, even if total driving hours are within limits, is a direct violation of FMCSA regulations and increases driver fatigue. Finally, an approach that assumes all drivers are eligible for the short-haul exemption without verifying the specific conditions of their operations, e.g., returning to the normal work reporting location within 12 hours and operating within a 150 air-mile radius, is a critical compliance error. This could lead to non-compliance for drivers who do not meet the exemption's criteria. Professional decision-making in managing driver hours requires a systematic process. This includes 1. Deep familiarization with all applicable federal and state HOS regulations and any relevant exemptions. 2. Implementing and enforcing the use of compliant ELDs for accurate record-keeping. 3. Establishing clear internal policies and training programs for drivers and dispatchers on HOS rules and fatigue management. 4. Regularly auditing HOS records to ensure compliance and identify potential issues. 5. Fostering a safety culture where drivers feel empowered to report concerns about fatigue or scheduling pressures without fear of reprisal. Question 2. System analysis indicates a dispatcher receives a call from a driver who has just loaded a shipment of lumber. The driver expresses concern that the dunnage and blocking used to secure the load may not be sufficient to prevent shifting, particularly on winding roads. The dispatcher is under pressure from the customer to deliver the load by a specific time to avoid significant penalties. The dispatcher knows the driver is experienced and has a good safety record. What is the most appropriate course of action for the dispatcher? Option A. Assign the load to another driver who is already en route and can pick it up without delay, assuming the original driver can provide a quick verbal confirmation of the load's general stability. Option B. Immediately dispatch the load, but inform the driver to contact dispatch if they encounter any issues with the load's stability. Option C. Instruct the driver to remain at the facility until the load can be resecured to meet all applicable cargo securement regulations. Option D. Instruct the driver to proceed with the delivery, assuring them that they can make adjustments to the securement if needed once they are on the road. Correct answer is D. Instruct the driver to proceed with the delivery, assuring them that they can make adjustments to the securement if needed once they are on the road. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common ethical dilemma in transportation where immediate operational pressures conflict with regulatory compliance and safety. A dispatcher faces pressure to dispatch a load quickly, potentially overlooking a critical cargo securement issue identified by the driver. The challenge lies in balancing the company's need for efficiency and customer satisfaction against the absolute legal and ethical obligation to ensure cargo is safely secured before transit. Failure to do so can lead to severe consequences, including accidents, cargo damage, fines, and reputational harm. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves prioritizing safety and regulatory compliance over immediate dispatch. This means the dispatcher must instruct the driver to rectify the cargo securement issue before the vehicle leaves the facility. This aligns directly with the fundamental principles of cargo securement regulations, which mandate that cargo must be properly secured at all times during transit. Ethically, it upholds the professional responsibility to protect public safety and prevent potential harm. This approach demonstrates a commitment to risk management and adherence to the Certified Transportation Professional (CTP) Code of Conduct, which emphasizes safety and compliance. Incorrect approaches analysis. Diverting the load to a different driver without verifying the securement issue is incorrect because it fails to address the root problem. The underlying risk of improperly secured cargo remains, and the responsibility for ensuring compliance is merely shifted, not fulfilled. This approach bypasses the necessary verification and corrective action, potentially leading to the same hazardous situation with a different driver. Dispatching the load with a verbal assurance from the driver that it will be secured en route is incorrect. Cargo securement regulations typically require that cargo be properly secured before transit begins. Relying on a driver to secure the load while in motion introduces significant risk of accidents, especially if the driver is unfamiliar with the specific cargo or securement methods, or if they encounter unexpected road conditions. This approach violates the principle of proactive safety measures, ignoring the driver's concern and dispatching the load as it represents a severe regulatory and ethical failure. This directly contravenes all cargo securement regulations and demonstrates a blatant disregard for safety. The potential for catastrophic failure, including cargo shifting, falling from the vehicle, or causing an accident, is extremely high. This approach prioritizes expediency at the expense of all safety and legal obligations. Professional reasoning. Professionals in transportation must adopt a risk-based decision-making framework. When a potential safety or regulatory issue is identified, the immediate priority is to investigate and mitigate the risk. This involves clear communication with the driver, adherence to established procedures, and a commitment to resolving the issue before proceeding. In situations involving cargo securement, the rule is clear. If it's not secure, it doesn't move. This principle should guide all dispatching and operational decisions, ensuring that safety and compliance are never compromised for the sake of speed or convenience. Question 3. The review process indicates that a transportation facility's electrical systems have not undergone a comprehensive safety audit in over 5 years, and there are documented instances of frayed wiring on some older equipment. The facility manager is considering several approaches to address this situation. Which approach best aligns with regulatory compliance and professional responsibility for workplace safety in a U.S.-based transportation facility. Option A. Address electrical issues only when they become apparent through equipment malfunction or employee complaints, and document these repairs as they occur. Option B. Allocate a minimal budget for immediate repairs of the most visibly damaged electrical components, deferring more extensive inspections or upgrades until the next fiscal year. Option C. Develop informal, verbal safety guidelines for employees to follow when working near electrical equipment, relying on their experience to identify and avoid hazards. Option D. Implement a comprehensive electrical safety program that includes regular risk assessments, documented inspection and maintenance schedules for all electrical equipment, and mandatory employee training on electrical hazard recognition and safe work practices, adhering to OSHA general industry standards. The correct answer is D. Implement a comprehensive electrical safety program that includes regular risk assessments, documented inspection and maintenance schedules for all electrical equipment, and mandatory employee training on electrical hazard recognition and safe work practices, adhering to OSHA general industry standards. Explanation: this scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires a transportation facility manager to balance operational efficiency with the paramount importance of workplace safety, specifically concerning electrical hazards. The manager must not only identify potential risks, but also implement and enforce appropriate safety protocols that align with regulatory requirements. The challenge lies in ensuring that all employees are adequately trained and that equipment is maintained to prevent incidents, which can have severe consequences for individuals and the organization. The correct approach involves a proactive and comprehensive strategy for electrical safety, rooted in regulatory compliance. This entails conducting regular risk assessments to identify potential electrical hazards, implementing engineering controls where feasible, and establishing strict administrative controls such as lockout/tagout procedures, regular equipment inspections, and comprehensive employee training on electrical safety protocols. Adherence to OSHA General Industry Standards, 29 CFR 1910 Subpart S, is critical, as these regulations provide specific requirements for electrical safety, including hazard identification, safe work practices, and emergency response. This approach ensures that the facility is not only compliant but also actively mitigating risks, thereby protecting employees and preventing costly accidents. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on reactive measures, such as only addressing electrical issues when they arise or after an incident has occurred, fails to meet regulatory obligations. This reactive stance demonstrates a lack of due diligence and a disregard for preventative safety measures mandated by OSHA. It creates an environment where hazards persist, increasing the likelihood of serious injury or fatality. Another incorrect approach that prioritizes cost savings over safety by delaying or neglecting necessary electrical maintenance and upgrades is also professionally unacceptable. Budget constraints are a reality. Compromising on safety to reduce immediate expenses is a direct violation of regulatory mandates and ethical responsibilities. Such actions can lead to catastrophic failures, severe injuries, and significant legal and financial repercussions for the company, far outweighing any short-term savings. A third incorrect approach that relies on informal, unwritten safety guidelines for electrical work is equally problematic. Regulations like those from OSHA require documented procedures, formal training, and clear communication of safety protocols. Informal guidelines are often inconsistent, poorly understood, and lack the rigor necessary to ensure compliance and effective risk management, leaving employees vulnerable to electrical hazards. The professional reasoning process for similar situations should involve a systematic approach. First, identify all relevant regulatory frameworks, in this case, U.S. OSHA standards for workplace safety. Second, conduct thorough risk assessments for all operational areas, paying close attention to specific hazards like electrical systems. Third, develop and implement a robust safety management system that includes preventative maintenance, engineering and administrative controls, comprehensive training, and clear emergency procedures. Fourth, ensure continuous monitoring and evaluation of the safety program, making adjustments as needed based on inspection, incident reports, and regulatory updates. Finally, foster a strong safety culture where employees feel empowered to report hazards and where safety is integrated into all operational decisions. Question 4. The efficiency study reveals that the current process for dispatching drivers to various delivery routes is experiencing delays attributed to the time taken for drivers to don and doff personal protective equipment, PPE, before and after their shifts. Management is considering streamlining this process to improve turnaround times. Which of the following approaches best balances operational efficiency with the imperative of ensuring driver safety and regulatory compliance regarding PPE? Option A. Conduct a comprehensive hazard assessment for each distinct delivery route and task, then select and mandate the specific PPE required for each, coupled with robust training on its proper use, inspection, and maintenance. Option B. Reduce the frequency of PPE inspections and maintenance to save time, relying on drivers to report any issues they encounter during their routes. Option C. Implement a standardized, minimal set of PPE for all drivers, assuming it covers the majority of common risks, and instruct drivers to wear it consistently to reduce decision-making time. Option D. Eliminate the requirement for certain types of PPE, such as basic eye protection, for routine local deliveries, based on the assumption that the risk of eye injury is low in these scenarios. The correct answer is C. Implement a standardized, minimal set of PPE for all drivers, assuming it covers the majority of common risks, and instruct drivers to wear it consistently to reduce decision-making time. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common implementation challenge in transportation operations, balancing operational efficiency with the mandatory safety requirements of personal protective equipment, PPE. The challenge lies in the potential for perceived or actual delays caused by PPE procedures, leading to pressure to bypass or streamline them. This creates a conflict between immediate operational goals and long-term safety compliance and employee well-being, requiring a professional to navigate these competing priorities ethically and legally. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a systematic hazard assessment to determine the appropriate PPE for specific tasks, followed by comprehensive training and strict enforcement of PPE usage. This aligns directly with the core principles of occupational safety regulations, such as those enforced by OSHA in the U.S. OSHA General Duty Clause requires employers to provide a workplace free from recognized hazards. Specific PPE standards, e.g., 29 CFR 1910 Subpart I mandate hazard assessment, selection, training, and maintenance of PPE. Ethically, employers have a duty of care to protect their employees from harm. A thorough hazard assessment ensures that the PPE selected directly addresses the identified risks, such as impact, chemical exposure, or noise, thereby fulfilling regulatory obligations and ethical responsibilities. Proper training ensures employees understand why PPE is necessary, how to use it correctly, and when to inspect and maintain it, fostering a culture of safety. Incorrect approaches analysis. An approach that prioritizes speed by assuming all tasks require the same basic PPE without a formal hazard assessment is professionally unacceptable. This fails to identify specific risks, potentially leading to the selection of inadequate PPE or the provision of unnecessary equipment, both of which are inefficient and unsafe. It violates the regulatory requirement for task-specific hazard assessment and the ethical principle of providing appropriate protection. An approach that relies solely on employee self-reporting for PPE needs, without employer-led assessment and oversight, is also professionally flawed. While employee input is valuable, it does not absolve the employer of their responsibility to conduct formal hazard assessments and ensure compliance. This approach risks overlooking hazards that employees may not recognize or report, leading to potential injuries and regulatory violations. It bypasses the employer's duty to proactively identify and mitigate risks. An approach that focuses on minimizing PPE costs by selecting the cheapest available options, regardless of their suitability for the identified hazards, is ethically and regulatorily unsound. While cost-effectiveness is a consideration, it cannot supersede the primary requirement of providing effective protection. Using substandard or inappropriate PPE can lead to injuries, increased workers' compensation claims, and significant legal and reputational damage, ultimately proving more costly than investing in appropriate safety equipment. This directly contravenes the regulatory intent of ensuring effective hazard control. Professional reasoning. Professionals in transportation operations must adopt a proactive and systematic approach to PPE management. This involves integrating safety into operational planning from the outset. The decision-making process should begin with a thorough hazard assessment for every task and work environment. This assessment should inform the selection of appropriate PPE, considering factors like the type of hazard, the duration of exposure, and the task's requirements. Subsequently, comprehensive training programs must be implemented to ensure all personnel understand the rationale behind PPE requirements and their correct usage. Regular inspections and maintenance schedules for PPE are crucial to ensure its continued effectiveness. Finally, a culture of accountability should be fostered, where adherence to PPE protocols is consistently reinforced, and deviations are addressed promptly and constructively. This integrated approach ensures both operational efficiency and, more importantly, the safety and well-being of the workforce, aligning with both regulatory mandates and ethical obligations. Question 5. Assessment of the most effective method for a trucking company to validate the readiness and efficacy of its Emergency Action Plan, EAP, for a potential hazardous materials spill incident, ensuring compliance with U.S. regulatory frameworks and best practices for emergency preparedness. Option A. Implement the EAP and rely on actual incidents to identify areas for improvement. Option B. Form an annual review of the EAP document to ensure it is up to date with current regulations and company policies. Option C. Hold quarterly tabletop exercises where key personnel discuss hypothetical hazardous materials incident scenarios and their responses. Option D. Conduct a full-scale, scenario-based drill simulating a specific hazardous materials incident, involving all relevant personnel and potentially external emergency responders. Correct answer is D. Conduct a full-scale, scenario-based drill simulating a specific hazardous materials incident, involving all relevant personnel and potentially external emergency responders. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in transportation operations, ensuring the effectiveness of an emergency action plan, EAP, for a hazardous materials incident. The professional challenge lies in moving beyond mere documentation to active preparedness and validation. A company's EAP is not just a compliance document. It's a critical operational tool designed to protect lives, property, and the environment. The difficulty arises from the dynamic nature of emergencies, the need for clear communication under stress, and the requirement for personnel to act decisively and correctly. Effective judgment is required to select the most appropriate method for verifying the EAP's readiness, balancing realism, cost-effectiveness, and the severity of potential consequences. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves conducting a full-scale, scenario-based drill that simulates a specific hazardous materials incident. This method is the most effective because it actively tests all components of the EAP in a realistic, albeit controlled, environment. It allows for the evaluation of communication protocols, evacuation procedures, the deployment of emergency response teams, and the coordination with external agencies. Regulatory frameworks, such as those outlined by the Occupational Safety and Health Administration (OSHA) in the U.S., specifically 29 CFR 1910, 120 for hazardous waste operations and emergency response (HAZWOPER), mandate that employers provide effective training and ensure that employees can respond appropriately to emergencies. A full-scale drill provides the most robust evidence of compliance and operational readiness, identifying gaps that might not be apparent in less comprehensive evaluations. It directly assesses the practical application of the EAP, not just theoretical knowledge. Incorrect approaches analysis. Reviewing the EAP document annually, while a necessary administrative step, is insufficient for verifying operational readiness. This approach fails to test the human element, communication channels under duress, or the practical execution of procedures. It is a passive review that does not simulate the chaos or urgency of a real event. Conducting tabletop exercises to discuss hypothetical scenarios is a valuable training tool for familiarizing personnel with the EAP's content and their roles. However, it does not replicate the physical and logistical challenges of an actual emergency, such as the time it takes to evacuate, the effectiveness of communication equipment in a crisis, or the coordination of on-site response. It tests understanding, not execution. Implementing a new EAP and then waiting for a real incident to test its effectiveness is a grave ethical and regulatory failure. This approach demonstrates a lack of due diligence and a disregard for the potential consequences of an untested plan. It places employees, the public, and the environment at significant risk, violating the fundamental principle of proactive safety management and potentially leading to severe penalties under various transportation and environmental regulations. Professional reasoning. Professionals in transportation emergency response planning must adopt a proactive and validation-oriented mindset. The decision-making process should prioritize methods that provide the highest degree of confidence in the EAP's effectiveness. This involves 1. Understanding the specific hazards and risks associated with the operation. 2. Identifying the critical elements of the EAP that must be tested. 3. Selecting evaluation methods that realistically simulate emergency conditions, from communication to physical response. 4. Regularly reviewing and updating the EAP based on drill outcomes, incident reviews, and changes in regulations or operations. 5. Ensuring that training and drills are conducted in accordance with applicable regulatory requirements and industry best practices. The goal is not just to have a plan, but to have a plan that works when it is needed most. Question 6. Upon reviewing the aftermath of a significant cargo spill that disrupted a key transportation route, a certified transportation professional, CTP, is tasked with leading the incident investigation. The primary goal is to understand what happened and prevent future occurrences. Which of the following approaches best aligns with professional best practices and regulatory expectations for incident investigation and analysis? Option A. Rely on existing operational logs and a quick review of the incident scene to determine the most probable cause, then propose minor adjustments to the current workflow. Option B. Focus on identifying the individual directly responsible for the spill and implementing disciplinary action to serve as a deterrent to others, with minimal effort dedicated to understanding the broader contributing factors. Option C. Conduct a thorough investigation using a structured root cause analysis, RCA methodology, meticulously collecting all relevant data, interviewing all involved parties without assigning blame prematurely, and developing comprehensive corrective and preventive actions, COPPA, based on identified root causes, followed by a detailed investigation report. Option D. Immediately implement new loading procedures based on initial operator feedback to prevent a repeat of the immediate cause of the spill, and then proceed with a less formal review of the incident. The correct answer is D. Immediately implement new loading procedures based on initial operator feedback to prevent a repeat of the immediate cause of the spill, and then proceed with a less formal review of the incident. Explanation. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires a transportation professional to balance the immediate need for operational continuity with the critical requirement for thorough and unbiased incident investigation. The pressure to resume normal operations quickly can lead to shortcuts in data collection and analysis, potentially compromising the identification of true root causes. Furthermore, the involvement of multiple stakeholders with potentially conflicting interests, e.g., operations, safety, legal, necessitates careful navigation to ensure an objective investigation. The correct approach involves a systematic and documented process that prioritizes data integrity and thorough analysis before implementing corrective actions. This aligns with best practices in incident investigation, which emphasize understanding the sequence of events, identifying contributing factors, and determining the underlying root causes rather than just immediate causes. Regulatory frameworks, such as those governing transportation safety, mandate or strongly encourage such comprehensive investigations to prevent recurrence. The ethical obligation of a transportation professional is to ensure the safety and efficiency of operations, which is best served by a robust investigation that leads to effective preventive measures. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on immediate fixes without a deep dive into root causes fails to address the systemic issues that led to the incident. This can result in recurring incidents, increased costs, and potential regulatory noncompliance. Ethically, this approach neglects the professional duty to ensure long-term safety and operational integrity. Another incorrect approach that involves prematurely assigning blame without a thorough investigation is detrimental to a learning culture. It can lead to defensiveness, hinder open reporting of safety concerns, and prevent the identification of systemic weaknesses. This violates the principles of fair process and can create an environment where employees are reluctant to report near misses or minor incidents, which are valuable learning opportunities. A further incorrect approach that relies on anecdotal evidence or incomplete data collection for analysis undermines the credibility of the investigation and the effectiveness of any proposed solutions. This can lead to misdiagnosis of the problem and the implementation of ineffective or even counterproductive corrective actions. Professionally, this demonstrates a lack of diligence and adherence to established investigative methodologies. The professional reasoning process for similar situations should involve 1. Immediately securing the incident scene and preserving evidence. 2. Assembling a qualified investigation team. 3. Developing a clear investigation plan that outlines objectives, scope, and methodology. 4. Systematically collecting all relevant data, including witness statements, physical evidence, and operational records, ensuring accuracy and completeness. 5. Applying appropriate root cause analysis, RCA methodologies to identify underlying systemic issues. 6. Developing and implementing evidence-based corrective and preventive actions, CAPA. 7. Documenting the entire process and findings in a comprehensive investigation report. 8. Establishing a system for monitoring the effectiveness of CAPA and conducting trend analysis to identify recurring issues. Question 7. The audit findings indicate that the organization's Transportation Safety Management System, SMS, may not be effectively identifying and assessing all significant operational hazards. Which of the following actions represents the most appropriate and compliant response to address this finding? Option A. Conduct a comprehensive review and, if necessary, revise the methodologies and procedures for hazard identification and risk assessment within the SMS, ensuring they are robust and systematically applied. Option B. Introduce a new set of safety performance indicators, SPI, focused on hazard reporting frequency and risk mitigation effectiveness. Option C. Schedule a mandatory one-time training session for all personnel on basic hazard identification and reporting techniques. Option D. Update the organization's safety policy to emphasize the importance of hazard reporting and risk management. The correct answer is A. Conduct a comprehensive review and, if necessary, revise the methodologies and procedures for hazard identification and risk assessment within the SMS, ensuring they are robust and systematically applied. Explanation. The audit findings indicate a potential gap in the organization's Transportation Safety Management System, SMS. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires the transportation professional to not only identify the deficiency, but also to propose the most effective and compliant course of action for remediation. The challenge lies in balancing immediate corrective action with the long-term sustainability and effectiveness of the SMS, ensuring it aligns with regulatory expectations and best practices for hazard identification and risk assessment. Careful judgment is required to select an approach that is both thorough and efficient, avoiding superficial fixes that could lead to recurring issues. The correct approach involves a comprehensive review of the hazard identification and risk assessment processes within the SMS. This entails a detailed examination of existing methodologies, their application, and the documentation of identified hazards and assessed risks. The goal is to determine if the current methods are robust enough to proactively identify all significant hazards and accurately assess their associated risks, thereby informing effective mitigation strategies. This approach is correct because it directly addresses the root cause of potential safety deficiencies identified by the audit. It aligns with the fundamental principles of SMS development and implementation, which mandate systematic hazard identification and risk assessment as the bedrock of safety assurance. Regulatory frameworks for SMS, such as those promoted by the Federal Aviation Administration, FAA, for aviation or similar principles in other transportation sectors, emphasize a proactive and systematic approach to safety, requiring organizations to understand and manage their risks effectively. This approach ensures that the organization's safety performance is based on a thorough understanding of its operational hazards and the effectiveness of its controls, fostering a culture of continuous improvement. An incorrect approach would be to focus solely on updating the safety policy without addressing the underlying processes. While a safety policy is crucial, it is a statement of intent and commitment. If the hazard identification and risk assessment methodologies are flawed, simply updating the policy will not rectify the systemic issues. It fails to address the audit's findings at a procedural level and represents a superficial response that does not enhance actual safety performance. Another incorrect approach would be to implement new safety performance indicators, SPI, without first ensuring the hazard identification and risk assessment processes are sound. SPIs are designed to measure the effectiveness of safety controls and the overall performance of the SMS. If the hazards and risks are not being accurately identified and assessed, the SPIs may not accurately reflect the true safety status of the operation, or they may be measuring the wrong things. This approach prioritizes measurement over fundamental risk management, leading to potentially misleading data and ineffective interventions. A third incorrect approach would be to conduct a one-time training session on hazard reporting for all staff. While training is important, a single session without a review and potential overhaul of the underlying hazard identification and risk assessment methodologies is insufficient. This addresses a symptom, reporting, rather than the potential disease, inadequate identification and assessment processes. It fails to ensure that the organization has the systematic capability to identify and manage risks effectively, which is the core requirement of an SMS. A professional decision-making process for similar situations should begin with a thorough understanding of the audit findings and their implications for the SMS. The professional should then consult the relevant regulatory framework and internal SMS documentation to identify the specific requirements related to hazard identification and risk assessment. The next step is to evaluate the current processes against these requirements and best practices. Based on this evaluation, a targeted and systematic remediation plan should be developed, prioritizing actions that address the root causes of any identified deficiencies. This plan should include clear objectives, timelines, and responsibilities, and its effectiveness should be monitored through ongoing evaluation and auditing. Question 8. Performance analysis shows a consistent pattern of drivers exceeding posted speed limits on a specific route, particularly during peak delivery times, which has led to a minor increase in near-miss incidents. A senior driver, respected by his peers, has been observed engaging in this behavior multiple times. As the transportation manager, you are under pressure to maintain on-time delivery metrics. What is the most appropriate course of action to address this situation and reinforce a positive safety culture? Option A. Overlook the speeding behavior for now, given the pressure to meet delivery metrics, and focus on other safety initiatives that do not directly impact delivery times. Option B. Conduct a one-on-one meeting with the senior driver to discuss the observed speeding, explore the underlying reasons for the behavior e.g. time pressure, route familiarity, and collaboratively develop strategies to ensure adherence to speed limits, while also communicating the importance of safety to all drivers. Option C. Issue a formal written warning to the senior driver for violating company policy and exceeding speed limits, citing the increase in near-miss incidents as justification for disciplinary action. Option D. Implement a blanket policy of immediate suspension for any driver caught exceeding the speed limit, regardless of the circumstances or previous safety record. The correct answer is B. Conduct a one-on-one meeting with the senior driver to discuss the observed speeding, explore the underlying reasons for the behavior, e.g., time pressure, route familiarity, and collaboratively develop strategies to ensure adherence to speed limits, while also communicating the importance of safety to all drivers. Explanation. This scenario presents a common ethical dilemma in safety management, where a perceived short-term operational need conflicts with established safety protocols and the long-term goal of fostering a robust safety culture. The challenge lies in balancing the immediate pressure to meet performance targets with the fundamental responsibility to ensure the well-being of employees and compliance with regulatory standards. A professional transportation manager must navigate this by prioritizing safety principles and ethical conduct over expediency. The correct approach involves a proactive and collaborative strategy that addresses the root cause of the observed behavior while reinforcing the importance of safety. This includes conducting a thorough observation and feedback session with the driver, focusing on the specific at-risk behavior and its potential consequences. It also necessitates engaging the driver in a discussion about the underlying reasons for the deviation from protocol, such as time pressure or lack of resources, and collaboratively developing solutions. This aligns with the principles of behavior-based safety programs, which emphasize understanding and modifying behaviors that lead to incidents. Furthermore, it contributes to developing a positive safety culture by demonstrating that safety is a shared responsibility and that concerns are addressed constructively. This approach is ethically sound as it prioritizes employee well-being and legally compliant, as it adheres to general workplace safety regulations that mandate employers take reasonable steps to prevent hazards. An incorrect approach would be to ignore the observed behavior, assuming it is an isolated incident or not significant enough to warrant intervention. This failure to observe and provide feedback directly undermines the principles of behavior-based safety and neglects the employer's duty to identify and address at-risk behaviors. Ethically, it demonstrates a disregard for employee safety and can foster a culture where unsafe practices are tolerated. Another incorrect approach would be to immediately impose punitive measures without understanding the context or engaging in corrective dialogue. While disciplinary action may be necessary in some cases, resorting to it as a first step without observation and feedback can create fear and discourage employees from reporting safety concerns or admitting to mistakes, thereby damaging the safety culture. This approach fails to address the behavioral root cause and can lead to resentment and a decline in overall safety engagement. A third incorrect approach involves making an exception to the safety rule to accommodate the driver's perceived need, even if it means compromising safety standards. This sends a message that safety protocols are flexible and can be bypassed, eroding the integrity of the safety program and potentially setting a dangerous precedent. It directly contradicts the goal of developing a strong safety culture where rules are consistently applied and respected. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a systematic approach. 1. Observe and document the at-risk behavior. 2. Engage in a private, constructive feedback session with the employee, focusing on the behavior and its consequences. 3. Investigate the root cause of the behavior, considering factors like training, resources, and workload. 4. Collaborate with the employee to develop a plan for correction and prevention. 5. Follow up to ensure the plan is effective and reinforce positive safety behaviors. This process ensures that interventions are targeted, fair, and contribute to a sustainable safety culture. Question 9. Implementation of a safety audit program in a commercial trucking fleet requires a strategic approach to resource allocation. Considering the Certified Transportation Professional, CTP, exams focus on regulatory compliance and operational safety. Which of the following risk assessment strategies will be most effective in guiding the development of audit checklists and the prioritization of inspections for vehicles, facilities, and equipment? Option A. Developing audit checklists based on a general understanding of common transportation safety issues without specific consideration for the fleet's unique operational profile or emerging risks. Option B. Prioritizing audit areas based on the frequency and severity of past safety violations, while also incorporating an assessment of new operational risks and potential failure points in current equipment and procedures. Option C. Focusing audit efforts primarily on areas with the most readily available documentation and the easiest access for inspectors, regardless of their inherent safety risk. Option D. Conducting audits solely in response to reported incidents or near misses, treating them as isolated events rather than opportunities to identify systemic safety weaknesses. The correct answer is B. Prioritizing audit areas based on the frequency and severity of past safety violations, while also incorporating an assessment of new operational risks and potential failure points in current equipment and procedures. Explanation: this scenario is professionally challenging because it requires a transportation professional to balance the immediate need for operational efficiency with the long-term imperative of safety compliance. The pressure to maintain schedules and minimize downtime can create a conflict with the thoroughness required for effective safety auditing. Careful judgment is needed to ensure that risk assessment is integrated into the audit process, rather than being an afterthought or a superficial exercise. The correct approach involves proactively identifying potential hazards and their likelihood of occurrence and severity, then prioritizing audit efforts based on these risks. This aligns with the principles of a robust safety management system, which is a cornerstone of regulatory compliance in transportation. Specifically, regulatory frameworks like those governing commercial vehicle safety, e.g., federal motor carrier safety regulations in the U.S., mandate a proactive approach to safety, emphasizing hazard identification and mitigation. Ethically, a transportation professional has a duty of care to ensure the safety of their operations, employees, and the public, which is best served by a risk-based audit strategy. An approach that focuses solely on historical noncompliance without considering emerging risks is procedurally flawed. While past issues are important, they do not account for new operational changes, equipment, or regulatory updates that could introduce new hazards. This failure to adapt the audit scope to current operational realities can lead to overlooking critical safety gaps. An approach that prioritizes audits based on the ease of inspection or the availability of personnel, rather than the potential impact of identified issues, is ethically problematic. This can result in less critical areas receiving disproportionate attention, while high-risk areas are inadequately scrutinized, potentially endangering lives and property. It demonstrates a lack of commitment to the core safety mission. An approach that treats audit findings as mere administrative tasks without a clear link to corrective action planning is fundamentally deficient. Regulations require not just identification of noncompliance, but also the implementation of effective corrective measures to prevent recurrence. This approach neglects the crucial step of remediation, undermining the purpose of the audit itself and failing to meet regulatory expectations for continuous improvement in safety. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with understanding the organization's operational context and its associated risks. This involves consulting safety regulations, industry best practices, and internal data to identify potential areas of concern. The audit plan should then be developed to systematically address these identified risks, prioritizing areas with the highest potential for safety incidents. Regular review and adaptation of the audit plan based on new information or changes in operations are essential for maintaining an effective safety program. Question 10. Which approach would be most effective in ensuring compliance with U.S. Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration (FMCSA) regulations for vehicle safety and maintenance, while also promoting operational efficiency and driver safety? Option A. Deferring scheduled maintenance and periodic inspections to minimize vehicle downtime, only performing them when absolutely necessary to avoid immediate operational disruption. Option B. Focusing solely on completing the minimum required inspection documentation without a systematic process for tracking maintenance needs or identifying recurring vehicle issues. Option C. Relying primarily on driver reports of vehicle issues and addressing repairs only when a vehicle breaks down or is reported as unsafe. Option D. Implementing a comprehensive preventive maintenance program integrated with driver pre-trip and post-trip inspections, tracked and managed through fleet management software, and adhering to periodic inspection schedules as mandated by FMCSA. The correct answer is D. Implementing a comprehensive preventive maintenance program integrated with driver pre-trip and post-trip inspections, tracked and managed through fleet management software, and adhering to periodic inspection schedules as mandated by FMCSA. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in fleet management, balancing operational efficiency with the imperative of regulatory compliance and safety. Fleet manager must make critical decisions regarding vehicle maintenance and inspection programs that directly impact driver safety, public safety, operational costs, and legal standing. The challenge lies in interpreting and applying the specific requirements of the Certified Transportation Professional (CTP) exam's jurisdiction, which for this context we assume to be the United States Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration (FMCSA) regulations. Failure to adhere to these regulations can result in significant penalties, including fines, out-of-service orders, and damage to the company's reputation. The manager must also consider the practical implications of each approach on fleet uptime and driver productivity. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a proactive and systematic integration of FMCSA-mandated vehicle inspection programs with a robust preventive maintenance schedule, leveraging fleet management software for tracking and compliance. This approach directly aligns with 49 CFR Part 396, which outlines the requirements for inspection, repair, and maintenance of commercial motor vehicles. Specifically, it emphasizes the driver's responsibility for pre-trip and post-trip inspections, 49 CFR Section 396(11), and the motor carrier's responsibility for ensuring vehicles are periodically inspected and maintained in safe operating condition, 49 CFR Section 396(17). Utilizing fleet management software is crucial for documenting these activities, generating alerts for upcoming maintenance, and maintaining a clear audit trail for regulatory compliance. This method ensures that potential safety issues are identified and addressed before they lead to breakdowns or accidents, thereby minimizing risk and maximizing operational reliability. Incorrect approach is analysis, an approach that relies solely on reactive repairs based on driver reports or breakdowns fails to meet the FMCSA proactive inspection and maintenance mandates. This is a direct violation of 49 CFR Section 396.11 and Section 396.17, which require systematic inspections and maintenance. Such a reactive strategy increases the likelihood of safety-critical component failures, leading to accidents, injuries, and significant legal liabilities. An approach that prioritizes minimizing downtime by deferring scheduled maintenance or inspections until absolutely necessary, even if it means exceeding recommended service intervals, is also a regulatory failure. While it might seem cost-effective in the short term, it compromises vehicle safety and violates the spirit and letter of the FMCSA regulations, which require maintenance to be performed according to manufacturer recommendations and regulatory standards to ensure safe operation. This can lead to premature wear and tear, increased repair costs in the long run, and potential safety hazards. An approach that focuses only on the minimum required documentation for inspections without a comprehensive system for tracking maintenance needs or identifying recurring issues misses the opportunity for continuous improvement and proactive risk management. While basic documentation might satisfy a superficial audit, it does not demonstrate a commitment to a robust safety program as envisioned by the FMCSA. This can lead to overlooking systemic problems within the fleet's maintenance practices. Professional reasoning. Professionals in fleet management must adopt a decision-making process that prioritizes safety and compliance above all else. This involves understanding the specific regulatory requirements of the operating jurisdiction, in this case, FMCSA in the U.S. The process should include 1. Thoroughly understanding all applicable regulations regarding vehicle inspections, maintenance, and safety technologies. 2. Implementing a comprehensive preventive maintenance program that goes beyond minimum requirements, incorporating manufacturer recommendations and best practices. 3. Leveraging technology, such as fleet management software, to automate tracking, scheduling, and record-keeping for inspections and maintenance. 4. Regularly reviewing maintenance data to identify trends and areas for improvement. 5. Fostering a safety culture, where drivers and maintenance personnel are empowered to report issues and are trained on their responsibilities. Question 11. The analysis reveals that a transportation company is experiencing delays in its freight delivery schedules, primarily attributed to frequent vehicle inspections and driver interventions at various checkpoints. To optimize delivery times and reduce these disruptions, management is considering implementing a new dispatch system that prioritizes route speed and directness above all else. Which of the following approaches best balances the company's need for process optimization with its absolute obligation for regulatory compliance under U.S. federal and state transportation laws? Option A. Rely on a generalized compliance checklist that is updated only annually, assuming that most federal and state regulations remain static throughout the year, and instruct dispatchers to prioritize route efficiency. Option B. Implement a new dispatch system that integrates real-time regulatory compliance checks for hours of service, vehicle maintenance records, and cargo classifications, flagging potential issues before dispatch and suggesting compliant routes. Option C. Focus solely on optimizing routing algorithms for maximum speed and directness, assuming drivers are responsible for managing their own compliance with all federal and state regulations during transit. Option D. Temporarily suspend all non-critical vehicle inspections and driver compliance checks to expedite deliveries, with a plan to address any discovered violations after the current delivery surge has passed. The correct answer is B. Implement a new dispatch system that integrates real-time regulatory compliance checks for hours of service, vehicle maintenance records, and cargo classifications, flagging potential issues before dispatch and suggesting compliant routes. Explanation. The analysis reveals a common challenge in transportation operations, balancing the need for efficient processes with the imperative of strict regulatory compliance. This scenario is professionally challenging because a failure to accurately interpret and apply the nuances of federal, state, and local regulations can lead to significant penalties, operational disruptions, and reputational damage. The complexity arises from the layered nature of regulations, where a single operation might be subject to multiple overlapping requirements from agencies like the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration, FMCSA, Occupational Safety and Health Administration, OSHA, and Environmental Protection Agency, EPA, as well as specific State Department of Transportation, DOT, rules and local ordinances. The correct approach involves a proactive and systematic review of all applicable regulations and the development of internal policies and procedures that directly address these requirements. This includes establishing robust record-keeping systems to document compliance efforts, training personnel on regulatory obligations, and implementing regular audits to identify and rectify any gaps. This approach is correct because it aligns with the fundamental principles of regulatory compliance, which demand diligence, accuracy, and a commitment to safety and environmental stewardship as mandated by federal laws, e.g. the Motor Carrier Act of 1980, hazardous materials regulations, and their state counterparts. It also addresses the core tenets of professional responsibility for a certified transportation professional, CTP, to ensure operations are not only efficient, but also legal and safe. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on operational efficiency without a thorough regulatory review would fail to identify potential violations of FMCSA hours of service rules, OSHA safety standards for vehicle maintenance, or EPA regulations regarding emissions and waste disposal. This oversight could lead to fines, out-of-service orders, and increased liability. Another incorrect approach that relies on outdated compliance information would be equally detrimental, as transportation regulations are subject to frequent updates and amendments. Failure to stay current with these changes, such as new ELD mandates or revised hazardous materials classifications, constitutes a significant regulatory failure and exposes the company to penalties for non-compliance. A third incorrect approach that delegates compliance responsibility without establishing clear oversight and accountability mechanisms would create a compliance vacuum, increasing the likelihood of errors and omissions across various regulatory domains. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes regulatory understanding and integration into operational planning. This involves 1. Identifying all relevant federal, state, and local regulatory bodies and their specific mandates applicable to the transportation operation. 2. Conducting a comprehensive gap analysis between current practices and regulatory requirements. 3. Developing and implementing clear, documented policies and procedures that embed compliance into daily workflows. 4. Establishing a continuous monitoring and auditing process to ensure ongoing adherence and adapt to regulatory changes. 5. Fostering a culture of compliance through regular training and open communication channels for reporting concerns. Question 12. Quality control measures reveal a recurring pattern of minor damage to fragile electronic components during transit, primarily attributed to vibration and improper handling at transfer points. The company's current insurance policy for cargo liability is comprehensive, but premiums are rising. What is the most effective and compliant approach to address this identified risk? Option A. Focus on streamlining the claims processing department to expedite reimbursements for damaged goods, assuming insurance will cover the majority of losses. Option B. Implement enhanced protective packaging solutions for the fragile electronic components and conduct targeted training for personnel involved in handling and transfer operations, while reviewing the existing cargo insurance policy to ensure it adequately covers the residual risk. Option C. Increase the coverage limits on the existing cargo liability insurance policy to absorb potential future damage claims related to these components. Option D. Reduce the cost of packaging materials for these components to offset potential increases in insurance premiums. The correct answer is B. Implement enhanced protective packaging solutions for the fragile electronic components and conduct targeted training for personnel involved in handling and transfer operations, while reviewing the existing cargo insurance policy to ensure it adequately covers the residual risk. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires a transportation company to balance operational efficiency with robust risk management, specifically concerning the identification and mitigation of potential cargo damage. The challenge lies in accurately assessing the likelihood and impact of various damage scenarios, and then selecting the most effective and compliant control strategies. Failure to do so can lead to significant financial losses, reputational damage, and potential regulatory scrutiny under the CTP framework, which emphasizes proactive risk mitigation and adherence to industry best practices for safe and reliable transportation. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a systematic process of identifying potential cargo damage risks, assessing their likelihood and impact, and then implementing a layered strategy that includes preventative measures, appropriate insurance, and a clear claims management protocol. This aligns with CTP principles of comprehensive risk management, which mandate not just reactive claims handling but proactive loss prevention. Specifically, implementing enhanced packaging standards directly addresses the identified risk of damage due to handling and transit stresses, thereby reducing the likelihood of claims. Simultaneously, ensuring adequate cargo insurance coverage provides a financial safety net for any residual risks that cannot be entirely eliminated. A well-defined claims management process ensures that when losses do occur, they are handled efficiently and in compliance with policy terms, minimizing further disruption and cost. This integrated approach is ethically sound as it demonstrates a commitment to protecting client assets and fulfilling contractual obligations. Incorrect approaches analysis. An approach that focuses solely on increasing insurance coverage without addressing the root causes of potential damage is insufficient. While insurance is a critical component of risk management, it is a financial transfer mechanism, not a preventative one. Relying solely on insurance without implementing loss prevention strategies fails to meet the CTP's emphasis on proactive risk mitigation and can lead to escalating premiums and a perception of poor operational control. This approach also neglects the direct impact on customer satisfaction and the company's reputation for reliability. An approach that prioritizes cost reduction by downgrading packaging materials, even if it appears to reduce immediate expenses, is a significant regulatory and ethical failure. This directly contradicts the principle of protecting cargo and increasing the likelihood of damage. Such a decision would likely violate implied or explicit contractual obligations to deliver goods in good condition and could lead to substantial claims, increased insurance costs, and damage to the company's reputation. It demonstrates a lack of due diligence in risk assessment and control. An approach that delays or inadequately documents the claims management process, even with appropriate insurance, is also problematic. While not directly causing the damage, poor claims handling can exacerbate financial losses through extended resolution times, disputes, and potential noncompliance with insurer requirements. This can lead to claim denials, increased operational disruption, and a breakdown in trust with both clients and insurers, undermining the overall risk management framework. Professional reasoning. Professionals in transportation risk management must adopt a holistic and proactive approach. This involves a continuous cycle of risk identification, assessment, and control. When faced with potential cargo damage, the decision-making process should begin with understanding the specific vulnerabilities of the cargo and the transit environment. The next step is to evaluate control strategies based on their effectiveness in reducing likelihood and impact, considering both preventative measures and financial safeguards like insurance. The most effective strategies are those that combine both. Professionals should always prioritize actions that prevent loss over those that merely transfer financial risk, ensuring compliance with industry standards and ethical obligations to clients and stakeholders. Question 13. Risk assessment procedures indicate a significant prevalence of musculoskeletal disorders, MSD, among long-haul truck drivers due to prolonged sitting, vibration, and awkward postures during loading/unloading. Which of the following approaches best addresses these ergonomic challenges within the regulatory framework for occupational health and safety? Option A. Implement a comprehensive ergonomic program that includes regular assessments of driver workstations, targeted training on safe manual handling and posture, and modifications to vehicle cabins and loading procedures based on identified risks. Option B. Focus solely on reducing driver shift lengths to minimize exposure time, without addressing the inherent ergonomic design of the vehicle or the manual handling tasks. Option C. Provide drivers with access to over-the-counter pain relief medication and encourage them to report any discomfort promptly. Option D. Distribute generic safety pamphlets on back health and require drivers to sign acknowledgments of receipt, assuming individual responsibility for ergonomic practices. The correct answer is A. Implement a comprehensive ergonomic program that includes regular assessments of driver workstations, targeted training on safe manual handling and posture, and modifications to vehicle cabins and loading procedures based on identified risks. Explanation: this scenario is professionally challenging because it requires a transportation company to balance operational efficiency with the health and safety of its drivers. Specifically concerning musculoskeletal disorder, MSD, prevention, the core challenge lies in implementing effective ergonomic practices that are both practical for a mobile workforce and compliant with relevant regulations, without compromising service delivery. Careful judgment is required to select an approach that is not only compliant but also sustainable and genuinely protective of driver well-being. The correct approach involves a comprehensive, multifaceted strategy that integrates ergonomic principles into daily operations, focusing on proactive measures and continuous improvement. This includes conducting thorough ergonomic assessments of driver workstations, cabins, providing targeted training on safe manual handling techniques and posture, and implementing workplace design modifications where feasible. This approach aligns with the overarching regulatory framework for occupational health and safety, which mandates employers to identify and mitigate workplace hazards, including those leading to MSDs. Ethically, it demonstrates a commitment to employee welfare, fostering a safer and more productive work environment. An approach that solely relies on providing generic safety manuals without practical application or tailored training fails to address the specific ergonomic risks inherent in transportation roles. This is a regulatory failure because it does not meet the employer's duty to provide adequate training and supervision to prevent workplace injuries. Ethically, it is insufficient as it places the burden of risk mitigation entirely on the employee without providing the necessary tools or knowledge. Another incorrect approach, focusing only on reactive measures like providing pain relief medication after an injury occurs, is a significant regulatory and ethical failure. This is reactive rather than preventative, violating the principle of hazard control. Regulations typically require employers to proactively identify and control risks, not merely manage the consequences of exposure. Ethically, this approach prioritizes symptom management over addressing the root causes of MSDs, which is unacceptable. A third incorrect approach, which prioritizes cost savings by implementing minimal, superficial changes to vehicle interiors without proper assessment or driver input, is also professionally unacceptable. This demonstrates a disregard for the employer's responsibility to provide a safe working environment and can lead to continued exposure to ergonomic hazards. This is a regulatory failure, as it likely falls short of the required standards for hazard identification and control. Ethically, it prioritizes financial gain over the health and safety of employees. Professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a systematic risk management framework. This begins with hazard identification, specifically focusing on ergonomic risk factors in the transportation environment. This is followed by risk assessment, evaluating the likelihood and severity of MSDs. Control measures should then be implemented, prioritizing elimination or substitution, followed by engineering controls, workplace design, administrative controls, training, work practices, and finally, personal protective equipment. Continuous monitoring and review are crucial to ensure the effectiveness of these measures and to adapt to changing conditions or new information. Engaging drivers in the assessment and solution development process is also a critical component of effective and sustainable ergonomic programs. Question 14. The audit findings indicate that several recent shipments of hazardous materials were dispatched without a complete verification of their classification, packaging integrity, and required placarding against the latest 49 CFR regulations. As the certified transportation professional responsible for overseeing these operations, what is the most appropriate immediate course of action to ensure compliance and mitigate risk? Option A. Proceed with shipments that are already in transit, focusing only on ensuring the drivers have the Emergency Response Guidebook, ERG, readily accessible. Option B. Immediately resume all shipments after instructing drivers to exercise extra caution, as the materials have been shipped previously without incident. Option C. Delegate the responsibility of re-verifying the hazmat documentation to the dispatch team, assuming they have sufficient general knowledge of hazardous materials transportation. Option D. Halt all further shipments of hazardous materials until a comprehensive review of each shipment's classification, packaging, labeling, and placarding is conducted against the specific requirements of 49 CFR Parts 100-185, and the driver's training and endorsement are confirmed. Correct answer is B. Immediately resume all shipments after instructing drivers to exercise extra caution, as the materials have been shipped previously without incident. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires a transportation professional to balance operational efficiency with stringent regulatory compliance for hazardous materials. The audit findings highlight a potential breakdown in a critical safety process, necessitating immediate and accurate corrective action to prevent future incidents, protect public safety, and avoid severe penalties. The pressure to resume operations quickly must not override the imperative to adhere to hazardous materials regulations. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a thorough review of the specific hazardous materials involved, their classification, packaging, labeling, and shipping documentation against the requirements of 49 CFR Code of Federal Regulations, Parts 100-185. This includes verifying that the chosen packaging meets performance standards for the specific hazard class and packing group, that all required markings and labels are present and correct, and that the shipping papers accurately describe the material, quantity, and emergency contact information. Furthermore, it necessitates confirming that the driver possesses the appropriate hazmat endorsement and that the company has a current security plan in place that addresses the transportation of these materials. This comprehensive verification ensures compliance with all applicable federal regulations designed to mitigate the risks associated with hazmat transport. Incorrect approaches analysis. An approach that focuses solely on the immediate resumption of shipments without a detailed regulatory review is incorrect because it bypasses the fundamental safety checks mandated by 49 CFR. This failure to verify classification, packaging, labeling, and documentation directly contravenes the regulations designed to prevent incidents and ensure proper response if one occurs, demonstrates a disregard for the potential hazards and the legal obligations of the shipper and carrier. An approach that relies on the driver's recollection of previous shipments or general knowledge of hazmat is also incorrect. While driver training is crucial, it is not a substitute for verifying the specific requirements for each shipment. Regulations are detailed and can change, and relying on memory or general knowledge increases the risk of errors in classification, packaging, or documentation, leading to noncompliance. An approach that assumes the previous shipper or consignee handled all regulatory aspects correctly is flawed. While due diligence is expected, the ultimate responsibility for compliant shipment rests with the parties involved in the transportation process, including the carrier. A proactive audit and verification process is necessary to confirm that all parties have met their obligations. Professional reasoning. Professionals in hazmat transportation must adopt a proactive and meticulous approach. When audit findings reveal potential noncompliance, the decision-making process should involve 1. Halting operations related to the identified issue until a thorough investigation can be completed. 2. Consulting the relevant sections of 49 CFR and the Emergency Response Guidebook, ERG, for specific guidance on the materials in question. 3. Engaging with subject matter experts or regulatory compliance personnel if necessary. 4. Implementing corrective actions that address the root cause of the noncompliance and include retraining or process improvements. 5. Documenting all findings, actions taken, and verification of compliance. This systematic approach ensures that safety and regulatory adherence are prioritized, thereby protecting personnel, the public, and the environment. Question 15. Process analysis reveals that a vessel carrying a regulated hazardous material is preparing for cargo discharge. The vessel's captain has verbally confirmed that all safety procedures are in place and that the crew is experienced. The charterer is pressing for a rapid discharge to meet a tight delivery schedule. What is the most appropriate course of action for a certified transportation professional overseeing this operation to ensure compliance with U.S. Coast Guard regulations and protect against potential safety and environmental risks? Option A. Focus solely on expediting the cargo discharge process to meet the charterer's deadline, assuming standard operating procedures are adequate for this type of cargo. Option B. Accept the captain's verbal assurance of compliance and experienced crew, and prioritize facilitating the rapid discharge to meet the charterer's schedule. Option C. Rely on the vessel's existing standard operating procedures without specifically assessing the current cargo's unique hazards or prevailing environmental conditions. Option D. Conduct a thorough review of the vessel's safety management system, SMS, documentation. Verify the specific cargo handling procedures against applicable USC regulations, e.g., 46 CFR, NVIC, and confirm that pre-discharge safety checks have been performed and documented. The correct answer is D. Conduct a thorough review of the vessel's safety management system, SMS, documentation. Verify the specific cargo handling procedures against applicable USC regulations, e.g., 46 CFR, NVIC, and confirm that pre-discharge safety checks have been performed and documented. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent risks associated with marine transportation, specifically the potential for environmental damage and safety hazards during cargo operations. The CTP professional must balance operational efficiency with stringent regulatory compliance and ethical responsibility to prevent harm. Careful judgment is required to assess the adequacy of safety measures and their alignment with established protocols. The correct approach involves a thorough review of the vessel's safety management system, SMS, and the specific procedures for handling the hazardous cargo, cross-referencing them against the applicable U.S. Coast Guard USC regulations, such as those found in Title 46 of the Code of Federal Regulations, CFR, and relevant NVIC navigation and vessel inspection circulars. This approach prioritizes a systematic, evidence-based assessment that directly addresses the regulatory requirements for vessel safety and cargo handling. It ensures that all safety protocols are not only documented, but also demonstrably effective and compliant with USC mandates, thereby mitigating risks to personnel, the vessel, and the environment. An incorrect approach that relies solely on the captain's verbal assurance without independent verification fails to adhere to the principle of due diligence mandated by USC regulations. While a captain's experience is valuable, regulatory compliance requires documented procedures and evidence of their implementation. This approach risks overlooking critical safety deficiencies that could lead to incidents, violating the spirit and letter of regulations designed to prevent accidents and environmental pollution. Another incorrect approach, focusing only on the speed of cargo discharge to meet a tight schedule, directly contravenes USC regulations that prioritize safety over expediency. Regulations like 46 CFR Part 197, which covers hazardous materials, and general vessel safety standards, emphasize that cargo operations must be conducted in a manner that minimizes risk. Prioritizing speed without a comprehensive safety review is a direct violation of these safety-first principles and could result in severe penalties and environmental damage. A further incorrect approach, which involves assuming that standard operating procedures are sufficient without considering the specific nature of the cargo and current environmental conditions, is also professionally unsound. USC regulations often require specific risk assessments for different types of cargo and varying environmental conditions. Ignoring these nuances, even if standard procedures exist, can lead to inadequate safety measures and potential noncompliance, especially when dealing with hazardous materials or operating in challenging weather. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a structured risk assessment framework. This includes identifying potential hazards, evaluating their likelihood and impact, and implementing control measures that are compliant with all relevant USC regulations. Professionals should always seek documented evidence of compliance, conduct independent verifications where possible, and prioritize safety and environmental protection over operational pressures. When in doubt, consulting the specific USC regulations, seeking guidance from regulatory bodies, or engaging subject matter experts is crucial. Question 16. Consider a scenario where a severe winter storm is forecast to impact a major transportation corridor within the next 24 hours, with predictions of heavy snowfall, high winds, and rapidly dropping temperatures. As a certified transportation professional, CTP, responsible for fleet operations, what is the most appropriate course of action to ensure driver safety and operational continuity? Option A. Proactively communicate the forecast to all drivers, review and reinforce winter driving best practices, adjust dispatch schedules to avoid peak storm times where possible, and preemptively check the availability of de-icing materials and snow removal equipment at key depots. Option B. Instruct drivers to proceed with all scheduled routes, but to increase their following distance and reduce speed significantly, without any preemptive adjustments to schedules or equipment checks. Option C. Post a general safety bulletin about winter weather and instruct dispatchers to cancel any trips that drivers explicitly refuse to undertake due to weather concerns. Option D. Advise drivers to use their best judgment on the road and to report any hazardous conditions they encounter, while continuing with scheduled dispatches as planned. The correct answer is A. Proactively communicate the forecast to all drivers, review and reinforce winter driving best practices, adjust dispatch schedules to avoid peak storm times where possible, and preemptively check the availability of de-icing materials and snow removal equipment at key depots. Explanation: this scenario is professionally challenging because it requires balancing operational efficiency with the paramount safety of drivers and the public during adverse weather conditions. The CTP must navigate the complexities of weather forecasting, regulatory compliance, and the practical realities of transportation logistics. A failure to adequately prepare for or respond to winter weather can lead to accidents, cargo damage, delivery delays, and significant financial and reputational repercussions. The core challenge lies in making proactive, informed decisions that mitigate risk without unduly disrupting essential services. The correct approach involves a multifaceted strategy that prioritizes proactive planning and real-time adaptation. This includes establishing clear protocols for monitoring weather forecasts from reliable sources, implementing predefined operational adjustments based on severity levels, e.g., route modifications, speed restrictions, driver communication, and ensuring drivers are equipped with appropriate cold weather personal protective equipment, PPE, and trained in winter driving techniques. This aligns with the ethical responsibility of a transportation professional to safeguard lives and property, and implicitly with regulatory frameworks that mandate safe operating practices and due diligence in managing risks associated with environmental conditions. The CTP's role is to ensure that the organization's policies and procedures reflect these safety imperatives. An incorrect approach that relies solely on reactive measures, such as waiting for roads to become impassable before considering route changes or delaying dispatches until drivers report hazardous conditions, demonstrates a failure in due diligence and risk management. This reactive stance can lead to drivers being caught in dangerous situations, increasing the likelihood of accidents and violating the implicit duty of care. Another incorrect approach might involve neglecting to update or enforce cold weather PPE requirements, leaving drivers exposed to hypothermia or frostbite, which is a direct ethical and potentially regulatory failure concerning employee well-being. Furthermore, failing to establish a robust weather monitoring system and communication plan means the organization is not adequately prepared to anticipate and respond to changing conditions, leaving operations vulnerable to unexpected disruptions and safety hazards. Professional decision-making in such situations requires a systematic approach. First, identify potential hazards and assess their likelihood and impact. Second, consult reliable weather forecasts and internal operational capabilities. Third, develop and communicate clear contingency plans and operational adjustments. Fourth, empower drivers with the knowledge and resources to operate safely. And finally, establish feedback mechanisms to continuously improve preparedness and response strategies for future events. Question 17. The assessment process reveals that a cargo shipment contains both general freight and a small quantity of non-flammable, non-corrosive, but potentially reactive chemicals. The general freight is properly placarded, but the reactive chemicals are only identified by a basic shipping label, lacking the specific hazard class placarding required by FAA regulations for such materials when consolidated for air transport. The ground operations team is under pressure to expedite the loading process, which approach best ensures compliance with FAA regulations for aircraft safety and cargo handling. Option A. Accept the shipment based on the shipper's verbal assurance that the reactive chemicals are safe for transport and do not require additional placarding beyond the basic label. Option B. Load the general freight and segregate the reactive chemicals to a separate area of the cargo hold, relying on the basic shipping label for identification during the flight. Option C. Proceed with loading the shipment as is, assuming the reactive chemicals are not a significant risk given their non-flammable and non-corrosive nature, and the general freight is correctly placarded. Option D. Delay the loading process to obtain the correct hazard class placarding for the reactive chemicals from the shipper, and ensure all documentation is in order before proceeding. Correct answer is C. Proceed with loading the shipment as is, assuming the reactive chemicals are not a significant risk given their non-flammable and non-corrosive nature, and the general freight is correctly placarded. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the critical nature of aviation safety and the stringent regulatory environment governed by the FAA. Misinterpreting or failing to adhere to cargo handling regulations can lead to severe safety incidents, including aircraft damage, injury to personnel, and potential loss of life. The professional challenge lies in ensuring strict compliance with detailed, often complex, FAA regulations concerning the segregation and placarding of hazardous materials, even when faced with operational pressures or perceived minor deviations. The correct approach involves a thorough understanding and strict application of FAA regulations pertaining to the handling and segregation of cargo, particularly hazardous materials. This includes verifying proper identification, placarding, and segregation of all cargo, especially when different types of goods are consolidated. Adherence to 14 CFR Part 107 and related FAA advisory circulars is paramount. This approach is correct because it directly addresses the regulatory mandate to prevent dangerous interactions between incompatible materials during ground operations and flight, thereby mitigating risks to aircraft and passengers. An incorrect approach would be to assume that a minor deviation in placarding for a non-hazardous but potentially sensitive item is acceptable if the primary hazardous materials are correctly handled. This is a regulatory failure because FAA regulations are comprehensive and require accurate identification and handling of all cargo, not just the most dangerous. Another incorrect approach is to prioritize speed of ground operations over meticulous cargo verification, leading to the acceptance of a shipment without confirming all required documentation and placarding. This is a critical safety and regulatory failure, as it bypasses essential checks designed to prevent accidents. A third incorrect approach is to rely on the shipper's verbal assurance regarding the nature of the cargo without independent verification or review of shipping documents. This is a failure to exercise due diligence and uphold the regulatory responsibility of the air carrier or ground handler to ensure compliance. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes regulatory compliance and safety above all else. This involves a systematic review of all cargo documentation, a clear understanding of placarding requirements for all types of goods, and a commitment to verifying these against established FAA guidelines. When in doubt, seeking clarification from supervisors or regulatory experts is essential. The process should involve a stop and verify mentality, ensuring that no step in the cargo handling process is rushed to the detriment of safety and compliance. Question 18. The performance metrics show a slight increase in roadside inspection violations related to vehicle maintenance and driver record keeping. As a certified transportation professional, what is the most effective process optimization strategy to address this trend, ensuring compliance with FMCSA regulations and minimizing future out-of-service orders? Option A. Increase the frequency of driver self-reporting on vehicle condition without implementing a verification system, assuming drivers will identify and report all issues. Option B. Implement a comprehensive driver and vehicle compliance training program that includes detailed review of FMCSA North American Standard out-of-service criteria, coupled with a standardized, documented pre-trip and post-trip inspection checklist system, and regular internal audits of driver qualification files and vehicle maintenance records. Option C. Streamline the pre-trip inspection process to reduce the time drivers spend on it, prioritizing on-road time over detailed checks. Option D. Focus on disputing citations after roadside inspections occur, rather than implementing preventative measures. The correct answer is B. Implement a comprehensive driver and vehicle compliance training program that includes detailed review of FMCSA North American Standard out-of-service criteria, coupled with a standardized, documented pre-trip and post-trip inspection checklist system, and regular internal audits of driver qualification files and vehicle maintenance records. Explanation. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires a fleet manager to balance operational efficiency with strict adherence to safety regulations, specifically the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration's (FMCSA) roadside inspection procedures, and out-of-service criteria. The pressure to maintain high performance metrics can tempt shortcuts, but the absolute priority must be safety and compliance. Careful judgment is required to identify and implement sustainable processes that prevent violations rather than react to them. The correct approach focuses on proactive and systematic preparation for roadside inspections. This involves establishing clear, documented procedures for pre-trip and post-trip inspections, ensuring drivers are thoroughly trained on these procedures and the out-of-service criteria, and maintaining accurate, accessible vehicle and driver records. Regular internal audits and driver feedback mechanisms further reinforce compliance and identify potential issues before they lead to violations. This approach directly aligns with the FMCSA intent to promote highway safety by ensuring vehicles are mechanically sound and drivers are qualified and compliant. It demonstrates a commitment to regulatory adherence and a culture of safety, which is ethically and legally mandated. An incorrect approach that relies solely on driver self-reporting without verification fails to establish a robust compliance program. While drivers have a responsibility, the fleet manager is ultimately accountable for ensuring compliance. This approach risks overlooking critical vehicle defects or driver qualification issues that could lead to out-of-service orders and significant penalties. Another incorrect approach that focuses only on addressing violations after they occur is reactive and inefficient. This strategy incurs fines, potential operational disruptions, and damage to the company's reputation. It does not foster a culture of safety and compliance, nor does it proactively mitigate risks. A third incorrect approach that prioritizes speed over thoroughness during pre-trip inspections, perhaps due to time constraints, directly contravenes the spirit and letter of FMCSA regulations. The purpose of these inspections is to identify and rectify safety-critical defects before a vehicle is operated. Cutting corners here significantly increases the risk of roadside inspection failures. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with understanding the specific regulatory requirements, FMCSA regulations for roadside inspections, driver qualifications, and vehicle maintenance. This is followed by assessing current operational processes against these requirements to identify gaps. The next step involves developing and implementing standardized, documented procedures that address these gaps, with a strong emphasis on training and ongoing reinforcement. Finally, establishing a system for continuous monitoring, auditing, and feedback allows for ongoing improvement and adaptation to evolving regulations and operational needs. The ultimate goal is to embed a proactive safety and compliance culture throughout the organization. Question 19. The performance metrics show a significant increase in cargo damage claims and a rise in roadside inspection violations related to improper load securement over the past quarter. As a certified transportation professional, what is the most appropriate course of action to address these trends? Option A. Conduct a comprehensive review of current loading and unloading procedures, focusing on the specific securement methods employed, load planning, and distribution practices to identify deviations from regulatory requirements and best practices. Option B. Implement mandatory retraining for all drivers on basic cargo securement techniques, assuming the issue stems from driver error. Option C. Increase the frequency of random load checks at the loading dock without investigating the underlying causes of the securement issues. Option D. Instruct loading personnel to expedite the loading process, allowing for minor adjustments to securement if it speeds up turnaround times. The correct answer is A. Conduct a comprehensive review of current loading and unloading procedures, focusing on the specific securement methods employed, load planning, and distribution practices, to identify deviations from regulatory requirements and best practices. Explanation. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires balancing operational efficiency with stringent regulatory compliance and the paramount importance of cargo safety. The CTP must interpret performance metrics that indicate potential issues in cargo securement and handling, which directly impact safety, potential for damage, and legal adherence. The core challenge lies in identifying the root cause of the performance dip and implementing solutions that are both effective and compliant with the relevant regulatory framework. The correct approach involves a thorough review of loading and unloading procedures, focusing on the specific securement methods and load planning distribution. This approach is right because it directly addresses the potential causes of cargo damage and noncompliance indicated by the performance metrics. It necessitates a deep dive into the practical application of regulations concerning cargo securement, such as ensuring proper use of chains, straps, blocking and bracing, and verifying that load distribution adheres to weight limits and stability requirements. This proactive investigation aligns with the CTP's responsibility to uphold safety standards and prevent incidents, which are often detailed in regulations governing transportation operations. Ethical considerations also demand that the CTP prioritize the safety of the public and the integrity of the cargo over expediency. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on driver retraining without investigating the underlying procedural or equipment issues is professionally unacceptable. This fails to address the root cause if the problem lies in inadequate equipment, improper loading techniques by warehouse personnel, or unclear securement guidelines. It also overlooks potential regulatory violations related to the securement itself, not just the driver's execution. Another incorrect approach that prioritizes expediting the loading and unloading process by overlooking minor deviations from securement protocols is also professionally flawed. This approach risks significant regulatory penalties, cargo damage claims, and, most importantly, safety hazards. It demonstrates a disregard for the detailed requirements of cargo securement regulations, which are designed to prevent movement and shifting during transit. A third incorrect approach that involves simply increasing the frequency of load checks without identifying the specific points of failure in the securement process is inefficient and unlikely to resolve the underlying problem. While load checks are important, they are a verification step, not a preventative measure. Without understanding why securement is failing, simply checking more often does not rectify the issue and may mask systemic problems. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a systematic investigation. First, analyze the performance metrics to pinpoint the nature of the problem, e.g., frequency of damage, specific types of cargo affected. Second, consult the relevant regulatory framework, e.g., Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration FMCSA regulations in the U.S., if applicable to the CTP exam jurisdiction, for specific requirements on cargo securement, load distribution, and handling of hazardous materials. Third, conduct on-site observations and interviews with relevant personnel, drivers, loaders, warehouse staff, to understand current practices. Fourth, identify the gap between current practices and regulatory requirements. Finally, develop and implement corrective actions that address the root cause, ensuring compliance and enhancing safety. Question 20. Strategic planning requires a transportation company to establish a comprehensive program for personal protective equipment, PPE. Considering the dynamic nature of transportation operations and the regulatory mandate to ensure worker safety, which of the following approaches best aligns with best practices for PPE selection and use? Option A. Provide employees with a catalog of available PPE options and allow them to select the items they feel are most comfortable and convenient for their tasks. Option B. Distribute the required PPE to all employees and rely on their individual understanding of safety to ensure it is worn and maintained correctly. Option C. Conduct a thorough hazard assessment for all job functions and work environments. Use this assessment to select appropriate PPE that meets or exceeds regulatory standards, and implement a robust training program covering proper use, inspection, and maintenance of the selected PPE. Option D. Assume that the PPE currently in use is sufficient for all tasks, and only consider replacing it if an incident occurs that clearly demonstrates its inadequacy. The correct answer is C. Conduct a thorough hazard assessment for all job functions and work environments. Use this assessment to select appropriate PPE that meets or exceeds regulatory standards, and implement a robust training program covering proper use, inspection, and maintenance of the selected PPE. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires a transportation company to balance operational efficiency with the paramount importance of worker safety, specifically concerning personal protective equipment, PPE. The challenge lies in accurately assessing hazards in a dynamic environment where new tasks or equipment might be introduced, and ensuring that the selected PPE remains effective and is used correctly by all personnel. Failure to do so can lead to serious injuries, regulatory noncompliance, and significant financial and reputational damage. The professional judgment required involves a proactive, systematic approach to hazard identification and risk mitigation through appropriate PPE. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a comprehensive hazard assessment process that directly informs the selection, use, and maintenance of PPE. This process begins with identifying all potential hazards associated with specific job tasks, equipment, and the work environment. Based on this assessment, appropriate PPE is selected that provides the necessary protection against identified hazards. This selection must align with established industry standards and regulatory requirements, such as those outlined by the Occupational Safety and Health Administration (OSHA) in the United States. Furthermore, a robust training program is essential to ensure employees understand the importance of PPE, how to use it correctly, its limitations, and proper inspection and maintenance procedures. Regular review and updating of the hazard assessment and PPE program are critical to adapt to changing conditions and maintain effectiveness. This systematic, documented approach ensures compliance and prioritizes worker well-being. Incorrect approaches analysis. An approach that relies solely on employee preference for PPE selection is professionally unacceptable because it bypasses the critical hazard assessment step. Employee comfort or perceived ease of use should not supersede the need for protection against identified risks. This failure to conduct a formal hazard assessment violates regulatory mandates that require employers to provide a safe working environment and select appropriate protective equipment based on actual hazards. An approach that assumes existing PPE is adequate without periodic review or reassessment of job tasks is also professionally flawed. Transportation environments are dynamic. New equipment, routes, or operational procedures can introduce new or altered hazards. Without a proactive reassessment, the PPE may become insufficient, leading to potential injuries and non-compliance with the employer's ongoing duty to protect workers. This reactive stance rather than a proactive one is a significant ethical and regulatory failure. An approach that focuses only on providing PPE without comprehensive training on its proper use, limitations, and maintenance is incomplete and professionally deficient. Simply distributing PPE does not guarantee its effective use. Employees must be educated on why specific PPE is required, how to wear it correctly to achieve maximum protection, when it needs to be replaced or repaired, and how to inspect it for damage. This lack of training undermines the entire purpose of the PPE program and can lead to a false sense of security, increasing the risk of injury. Professional reasoning. Professionals in transportation management should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes a systematic and documented approach to PPE management. This framework should include 1. Hazard identification and risk assessment. Proactively identify all potential hazards associated with each task and work area. 2. PPE selection. Choose PPE that effectively mitigates the identified risks, referencing regulatory standards and manufacturer guidelines. 3. Training and communication. Develop and deliver comprehensive training programs covering the correct use, care, and limitations of all provided PPE. 4. Implementation and enforcement. Ensure consistent use of PPE through clear policies and supervision. 5. Inspection and maintenance. Establish regular inspection schedules and procedures for cleaning, repairing, or replacing PPE. 6. Review and update. Periodically review the hazard assessment and PPE program to ensure ongoing effectiveness and compliance with evolving regulations and operational changes. This structured approach ensures that PPE is not an afterthought but an integral component of a robust safety management system, aligning with both ethical responsibilities and regulatory requirements.